If you've been thinking about building a raised garden bed this summer, there is still plenty of time to grow this year, and I'm going to show you how you can finish it in less than 10 minutes. Coming up.
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day now.
Welcome back to Growing in the City. If this is your first time seeing us, we provide weekly organic gardening videos to help you have a more successful growing season. And today, we're going to show you how to build a raised garden bed very quickly and why you should consider doing it now. What we're using today is just going to be just lumber that you would get at any place that sells lumber, and cinder blocks. They're also they can be called like planter wall blocks or sometimes garden blocks, and they're just stone type of or rock type of blocks that have been created. But what is really special with these is you'll see that they have a slot, and they have 4 slots, and they also have a hole inside. And so what that means is obviously whoever designed it thought about the purposes of lumber. And so if you were to measure the slot, you would notice that the slot on this one anyway is about 1 3/4 inches. And so it's perfectly set up for wood. Now you may think, well, hang on, a 2x4, that's 2 inches by 4 inches. How's that going to fit in something that is 1 3/4 inches? And in fact, when wood is when lumber is created through the sawing process, what starts as 2 inches actually works its way down, and so a piece of lumber is really 1.5 inches. And you'll also notice it on the other direction too. So for example, if you were to look at a 2x4, it would actually be 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and that's very standard. And so when you look at this block here, and it's got the 1 3/4 gap, and then the wood that's 1.5, it just slides right on down perfectly. The hole there in the middle is designed for rebar. So let's say, for example, that you wanted it to not be a foot high like I'm doing, but let's say you wanted it to maybe be 2 feet high or 3 feet high. Well, simply add the blocks one on top of the other, and now you have 3 blocks. And then you just take the back of your axe or your sledgehammer, and you just finish knocking it down. And so the benefit of the increased height is now, let's say, for example, if you're building it for someone and they have a hard time bending over or hard time reaching, well, now you've just made it easier for them, because now you've brought the soil up from the ground up to 3 feet high, for example. So it can make a huge difference. And that's another reason why you want to consider the layout, the dimensions of your garden bed before you certainly cut or build your materials. And one recommendation I definitely have is to make it so you're not stretching for more than 2 feet in. So for example, if you were going to do a square or a rectangle, you can have it be, let's say, 4 feet wide, but you want to be able to walk all the way around it. That way you only have to put your arms in 2 feet. If you do have questions about the design of what you're thinking about doing for your raised garden bed, definitely leave them in the comments, and I can definitely help you, if you have any questions. You may need to clear the area where you're building your raised garden bed. To avoid potentially damaging the fence or concrete, I'm simply going to stump the trunk and plant over and around it instead of digging the entire stump up. PSA here, don't forget to wear eye protection. I wasn't paying attention to the most important lenses here, and for what it's worth, I should have chosen a safer footwear too. Look at these gnarly things. it's almost like some kind of crazy tooth. These are very sharp, so I'm happy to, stunt that plant for sure. So you can now see how I'm going to build my garden bed with one side being the fence. I raked the bark dust dirt level with the concrete, so my planter boxes would be flat against the soil and concrete. The size board I chose was 2 by 12 by 16, so that's 2 inches wide, 12 inches tall, and 16 feet long. An 18-inch piece was cut off the end to create how wide the raised bed would be front to back. You don't have to buy 12 inches high, but I would certainly get at least 8 inches high so you can add 6 inches worth of soil to your raised bed. When designing your garden bed, there are some conditions that may justify using a ground cover. For example, if you're trying to build this over grass or an area where you have significant weed issues, I'd recommend using either a weed cloth or a weed tarp, sometimes they're called, and that will help prevent weeds from coming up. Yeah, if you have to deal with a lot of rodents or gophers and moles and that type of those type of animals in your garden, then another good option is wire cloth, and you just lay that down and basically they can't come up. So I don't really have either of those issues here, so I didn't, I basically burnt my money on the soil amendments because I was too lazy to go to a place to get it. So if you're wondering, I purchased the lumber just at a regular big box type of garden home improvement store that's willing to cut it for free, so I was able to bring it home ready to go. The planter blocks cost a little over $3, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can see an example if they're called something else where you live. One thing that you can do if you want to build a railing is, you can just, create and put a piece of wood on top here. That will help with that. There are a few great reasons why you might want to consider a raised garden bed. Firstly, if the area that you're trying to garden has really hard or really clay or just kind of, bad soil, not in the sense, of course, that that it's toxic necessarily, but maybe like, for example, if it's just really rocky. Well, with a raised garden bed, you create the bed, of course, and put the soil on top, and now whatever you're growing is going to be using the soil that you've put in. If your raised bed has a foot of soil or more, you'll be able to grow most things. The second reason you might want to consider a raised garden bed is, let's say, for example, you have lots of, let's say you have some big trees in the ground, and you don't want, you don't want to potentially disturb those tree roots, or you don't want to be competing with those tree roots. Having a raised garden bed is a way where you can basically just be growing on top of them where they won't be disturbed. And the third reason, and this is especially important if you have limited space, or like if you are in an apartment or something, with a raised bed, you can build on concrete, you could build on a patio, you could, they're temporary. All you would need is a little bit of time and a shovel to, get rid of it. All right, so that's all there is to it. All that's left is just to put the soil in. The next video we're going to go more into detail if you really want to know specific things that'll help your garden and your plants grow quickly. And we'll see you later. Have a good one.